Hello, Socials 8. Today we are going to be looking at Chapter 8, and Chapter 8 is all about Aztec citizenship and education. So, we know a little bit more about the Aztecs, and we've seen sort of what their society looks like and sort of where they came from. Today we're going to look at their society in a little more detail, and we're going to see some fairly unique things about the Aztecs, which makes them interesting society not only to learn about, but also one of the things that we sort of still look back to see sort of some of the rights and ideas they had. So let's get started. So once again, this is chapter 8. This is Aztec citizenship and education. So Aztec citizenship. Aztec society was focused on producing citizens who would contribute to the community. This is very similar to citizenship in any sort of society. So Canadian citizenship, part of being a Canadian citizen in Canada today is making some sort of producing something for the society, whether it be through your labor or by actually making something or just being a good citizen and contributing to society. So one of the things that we're going to find out they learned in school was how to be a good citizen. Um, the following quote I took is from a lesson on religion and good behavior, which was taught to students. So, uh, revere and greet your elders. Console the poor and afflicted with good works and words. Do not mock the old, the sick, and the maimed, or one who has sinned. Do not set a bad example or speak indiscreetly or interrupt the speech of others. So, what this is really showing us is this is when we look at this is basically a lesson on how to be a good person. Respect the elderly, help the people who are down on their luck, help the poor and the people who are suffering by treating them well and doing things for them. Do not mock people, do not be rude to people, and do not set a bad example. So the idea is to be a good example. So all these things tells us that a lot about the kind of different things the Aztecs valued. So this is just like Japan, just like Europe, we sort of see a feudalism pyramid or a feudal pyramid. So this is sort of the social hierarchy, just like any society that the Aztecs followed. So what we see right here is at the top we have the emperor. The emperor we're going to be looking at in detail, sort of for this whole unit is a man named Moctezuma, which we're going to find out a lot about him. So he was the emperor. So the emperor is the leader of Aztec society. Then underneath him, we have the nobility and priests. After that is merchants, artisans, and soldiers. So key here is we see how we know that Aztec society from chapter 7 expanded through trade and through war. So this would be why merchants and soldiers are at a very high level in society. After we have farmers, fishers, and women, and then finally we have slaves. Once again, what we're going to find out though is the Aztecs uh, are actually pretty fair to their slaves, and they slaves actually have some sort of level of legal standing. So we'll look at that in a little bit. But this is their social hierarchy, much like what we saw in Europe and in feudal Japan. So what does the ideal citizen look like in Aztec society? So, as the ideal Aztec citizen has these sort of five characteristics. So the first one being courage. Aztecs were expected to show courage and deal with hardships without complaining because it made them a strong army. So what we know about the Aztecs is they're a warring society. They're constantly pushing outwards, trying to take more land, and so they are a soldier society. So one thing that comes with being a soldier is courage, self-sacrifice. So um, the group was considered more important than the individual. So you sacrifice yourself, you make sacrifices for the betterment of society. Modesty. No one, not even the greatest warrior, was supposed to boast about personal achievements or do anything else to stand out from the crowd. So once again, this speaks to the importance of the group, not the individual. Clean living. People had to keep themselves healthy and avoid overindulging in food and drink. If they did not live cleanly, they were punished harshly because of what was considered evil behavior. And finally, obedience is everyone had to obey their superiors. So we have that feudal pyramid. So we see that you have to obey the people who are in charge of you. Um, this is sort of, we see a lot of sort of similarities between what we saw in Japan and Europe, where once again, the community comes first and the individual. However, when we looked at humanism back at the beginning of the year, we saw the individual starts to come out. This was not the case in Aztecs. Aztecs, the society, the community is the most important. So laws and lawmaking. So Aztec laws and rights were protected because a system of laws are written down. So people had rights and they were protected because they were codified and recorded. The legal system was an important part of maintaining order. It was there to remind people of their responsibility to be honest and obedient. So the whole point of having a legal system and punishing people for was to make sure people stayed obedient and were honest. Everyone had to obey laws, even the nobles. So once again, in unlike some other Europe, no one's above the laws here. Is you have to follow the laws. If you break the laws, you are culpable. So, which means you have to answer for your wrongdoing. Um, so there were two courts in the Aztec legal system, a lower court and a higher court. One could appeal to the high court and then the emperor if they did not like their verdict in the lower court. So this is sort of similar to what we have today is we have, if you commit a crime, you go to the lower court, you hear your trial. If you're not happy with the result, you can appeal it or you can go to the higher level of court. And if you do not like that higher level of court, you can actually go appeal right to the emperor. Judges base their verdict on the evidence that was presented to them, not who the person was on trial. And once the judges had reached their decision, they handed down a sentence. But here's where we see a little bit difference, and we see the harshness of Aztec society. So if you committed a lesser crime, you were given a fine, or you actually became a slave. Um, if you committed a more serious crime, you often were either sacrificed or you faced death. So what we have right here is we have some primary sources. About laws, and so we have two. So the first one is from a Florentine codex, which is there were judges and noblemen. Every day the common folk laid complaints before them. Calmly and prudently they heard the complaints. In the picture writing that recorded the case, they studied the complaints, and when they tested their truth, they sought out and inquired of informers and witnesses who could size up plaintiffs, who knew what had been stolen or what was changed. So this was a Florentine, so someone from Florence recording what is the Aztec sort of justice system, and we see it's very similar to ours today. They have people argue their cases, you get witnesses, and you record what is being said so you can look back on it later. This is much how like our legal system works. And so the other one is from another codex, so it's another recording of society. So before the reign of Moctezuma, the administration of public affairs had not been done systematically until he, being a prudent and able ruler, drew up a code of common law. Those who disobeyed were severely punished. This did not interfere with the restricted liberty which his subjects had on condition they minded their own business. So what this quote is saying is that Moctezuma, when he came to power and became emperor, he sort of brought a written down legal code, and if you broke the law, you were punished. But this last part is important because if you did not, the law did not interfere with the restricted liberty. So it did not interfere with people's rights, which a lot of places in the world, especially sort of in the Americas, this was not the case. And is that a lot of times people did not even have rights. So this is important. Aztec people had rights, even slaves. So there were two kinds of justice in Aztec society. The first one is restorative, and then we have retributive. So retributive justice deals with those that break the law by punishing them. So if you break the law, you're fined. You face retributive justice. You are fined. You get thrown in jail, or you're put to death. And this is based on three key values. Committing a crime is against society. Society has the right to punish you. If you treat others badly, you deserve to be treated badly. And if you are punished, you will not do it again because you don't want to be punished again. So this is retributive justice is basically based on punishment. Where restorative justice is different. Restorative justice is less about punishment and more about repairing society. It is most often used when dealing with youth, and it's based on three core values, which is when you commit a crime, you need to make up for the crime. You have to repair the damages. A crime against the whole community, a crime is against the whole community, so everyone should be involved in the process of repairing the harm. And if you understand how a crime affects others, you'll be less likely to commit that crime again. So, meaning if you see the results of your actions and you see the hurt you caused, you're less likely to do the same thing again. Last part of this is slave laws. So, slaves performed much necessary work for the Aztecs. So they had law. The Aztecs recognized the importance of slaves, so they had laws to protect their rights. So if you were a slave and you were beaten to death, your owner could be put to death as well. So this obviously protected slaves in the sense that they weren't beaten to death. If a slave could escape from the marketplace where they were sold and reach the emperor's palace, they would automatically be given their freedom. This sort of reminds me of sort of the serfs and feudalism. Is if you could escape for a year and a day, you could get your freedom. Um, the Aztec view of slavery. They did not think it was, and Aztecs had a very unique view of slavery. They did not think it was shameful to be a slave, but more like it was bad luck. You lost in battle, or you were taken. So they also did not consider slavery a permanent condition. Slaves could keep their property, even if they had their own slaves, until they paid off their debt and rejoined society. So what this means is basically you could eventually, once again, if you were a slave, it did not mean you didn't own possessions. You still were able to keep your possessions. However, you had a debt to pay to society, and so whether it was by money or working off your debt, you were a slave until you did that. Here's another unique thing: is children were not born slaves. Children who were born of slaves were free to society. So this is very different than sort of a lot of other examples of slavery in throughout the world. So that sort of brings us to the end of citizenship, and now we're going to look at education. And in my opinion, Aztec education is what separates the Aztecs from basically every other society on the earth. So Aztec so children were educated at home before they started school. It is estimated that they started school between the ages of 10 and 15, and children were pampered until they were 3. And so basically, once again, children were looked after until they were 3, but then after 3, they were supposed to be hardworking and obedient, and they were supposed to start contributing to society. If children were disobedient, they were punished. Punished. The idea of this was it turned them into citizens with a stone heart and a stone face. So, i.e., we see that sort of warrior-like part of society. And it made sure that they were hard workers, obedient, and they contributed to society. Education was highly valued. So we see here is that schooling is free. Unlike Europe, unlike many other places, people did not have to pay for school. They were given to every child. Every child went to school, and this was a universal education. And there was very little to no other groups on Earth at this point in time who had universal education. However, there were two different types of schools depending on your level of society. There was the Kalmak and the Tapakali, which once again it depends on what level of society is what school you went, and each school was taught different things. So the school for nobles was called the Kelmec. It was a school for nobility. It was located in the neighborhood where nobles lived, and it was often attached to a temple, signifying the importance of religion in Aztec society. And students studied codices. So codices are sort of like written down books about their society. Religion was also an important part of their education. So they studied things such as astronomy, astrology, mathematics, reading, writing, music, law, and the calendar. And when they did this, they were training to be generals in the army, judges, priests, scribes, high government officials, diplomats, and teachers. So these are the kind of things they studied in hope to have these sort of jobs. And so when you look at sort of what they trained to be, these jobs in society were seen as higher orders and they were filled by the nobility. So uh, once again, also showing sort of how advanced the Aztec society was is all higher education was based on the ability to read and write using glyphs, which is sort of picture writing. So it's interesting. So we look at this, and they have Aztec society has codified writing, which is one of sort of the key markers of an advanced society. Is you have a system of writing, and you have a system to take it down. So only nobles would learn how to read and write. Commoners receive their education through spoken word. Um, so this enforces the social hierarchy: is that if you're not a part of the nobility, you can't read and write. Um, uh, Aztec counting, what is our counting system based on? Our counting system is based on obviously tens. The Aztec counting system, though, however, was based on the number 20. This is because it takes a sacred meeting, and each day had 20 months. So another part of education for boys was military training. Boys trained as warriors at the school so they could defend the Aztec emperor. So every Aztec boy has to learn how to fight. Once their training was complete, they would have to serve in the army. Uh, they would have to serve as a soldier's servant and follow the army to observe. At 15 years of age, the boy would become warriors themselves and take active role in battle. The eagle and the jaguar warriors were the most respected and the highest rank. So it is important to these are important ranks, and if you were a good soldier, you would reach them. So military training and military service is compulsory, meaning you have to serve in the military. So uh, the education for the nobility is, well, it's sort of different. It is pretty similar to a lot of other societies. Where this becomes very unique is when we look at the education for commoners. So, once again, commoners went to school called Tepecales, and all commoners went to school, which is very different from Europe and very different from Japan. All instruction, however, it wasn't studying and reading; it was spoken, and they needed to learn all their lessons through memorization. They were given lessons in Aztec history, religion, and citizenship duties. Music was also important to society, so they learned how to play flutes, drums, and dance sacred dances. Boys spent much of their time in school doing hard labor like digging ditches and carrying firewood. Girls and boys received education from their parents as well. Um, so probably the most unique thing about this sort of commoner education is the Aztecs educated all women. So they educated both genders, which definitely did not happen in Japan and definitely did not happen in Europe. Aztec women, like many other places, had little political power. Um, the emperor had council members that were all men. However, they thought it was important for women to be educated. Every girl received education no matter what her family's rank was. At the age of 16, most girls got married to live with their husbands, and then it was their role to educate their children. As we know, Aztec education started at the home. So this is why girls received education, because they had to educate their children. Although women could not hold positions of public office, they were not undervalued. Women were healers and doctors and often traveled with the army, and some even became priestesses, and their wisdom was highly sought. Older women acted as matchmakers and midwives. So this is important, as women have a very important role, hence the reason why they must be educated. So this is very unique, and I can't stress this enough. This is not happening anywhere else in the world. Um, so when an Aztec girl was born, their umbilical cord was placed beneath the family fireplace. And when an Aztec boy was born, the umbilical cord was buried in a battlefield. So this sort of shows what the two social roles are for men and women. Girls are in the home, and it's important for them to rule the home. So their umbilical cord is placed beneath the family fireplace. When an Aztec boy is supposed to be a warrior, so his umbilical cord is buried on a battlefield. So it tells us that men are soldiers, women are homemakers. And so this is just this last sort of thing we have is sort of a quote about what the role of
Aztec girl is. Take care of your garments are such as are decent and proper, and observe they do not adorn yourself with much. Make certain that make proper, and observe that you do not adorn yourself with much finery, since this is a mark of vanity and folly. It is little becoming, as little becoming is it that your dress should be dirty or ragged, since rags are the mark of the low. When you speak, do not hurry your words. Speak deliberately and calmly, and walk. In walking, see that you behave becomingly, neither going with haste nor too slowly, since it is evidence of being puffed up to walk too slowly, and walking too hastily causes a vicious habit of restlessness and stability. So once again, we see sort of like a dichotomy of balance. Is you don't want to be too dirty, but you don't want to be too vain. You do not want to walk too quickly, but you also don't want to be lazy and walk too slowly. So this is the two sort of things that are covered in chapter 8. So education and citizenship are very important in Aztec society. So hopefully this gives you a little bit more of information and it helps you with some of the questions for chapter 8. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will talk to you next time. All the best.